This is just to say, right here at the very top of the show, that Rootbound is an independent podcast that only has fake ads. But you can support the show by visiting rootboundpodcast.com/support to find all the ways you can support the show, including supporting on Patreon. You are listening to Rootbound, a podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside.
This is a Rootbound public service announcement, sharing the message that plants are really cool. I mean, I think plants are cool. Don't you? Plants! They are really cool.
This is a Blue Line train to Largo or Gordon, through to the center of the car. The next stop is Eastern Market. Step back, doors open. This is Eastern Market. Doors opening on the left.
All right. Well, I just popped up out of the metro here in Washington, D.C., in a neighborhood called Eastern Market, and I'm headed over to a plant shop, which is surprising. I've never actually visited a plant shop here on the show Rootbound, and just to say that, Rootbound does not have any advertisements. This is not a sponsored episode for this plant shop, but I'm heading over there because there's a special event coming up here in DC called DC Plant Week with a bunch of participating plant shops, and so I thought it'd be nice to kind of meet the people at some of these plant shops, and so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to visit a shop called Rewild in Eastern Market. Hi there, I'm Steve. Is it Calais or
Kaylee.
Kaylee?
Yep.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I'm already recording. I hope that's okay. I just like
Oh,
to.
yeah, you're good.
Awesome. Oh, cool.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to get you a microphone here,
Okay, sounds good.
and then we'll get started.
Cool. I've never done anything like this.
Nice.
That's not entirely true. I used to be on my local news station for like a radio call-in hour.
Oh, really? Where was that?
I'm from upstate New York.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So you hosted a radio call-in show?
Yeah, so when I was living in upstate New York at home, I used to work for a local florist, and they were they were an institution. They'd been around for like 80 years. And he had a relationship with our local news station, WKTV, where in the spring he would just go on and answer like questions about plants and
cool.
flowers. Mostly like 70-year-old women calling in and not understanding to like mute their TV.
Classic.
So we're
classic.
spending like 5 minutes, the producer's like in my ear and
Turn your TV down, please.
turn your TV down. And they're like, what? I can't hear you. So mostly that, but learning how to have like the mic and the earpiece and having someone talk to you and like count you in, which like ADHD, really difficult to focus.
Yeah.
So I give people on TV a lot of credit.
So
for
were you
doing
actually doing it on TV?
Yep.
Oh,
So it was like a call-in segment. So they had like the main news desk and then like the little two chairs on the side. So I would sit and be like in conversation with one of the hosts, and then we would just like take the calls, look into the camera.
That's fun.
And I mean, the producers were great. They would like kind of do bullet points like on the
Yeah.
screen. I never really saw what I looked like because they're not, I mean, they're very professional. Obviously it's 2024, but, they didn't like give me recordings.
You didn't go, it's not, none of it's on YouTube now? You haven't?
I don't think so. Yeah, which a part of me is like, maybe it's for the best. Like,
That's
this is
so
like
funny.
at least 5 years ago now, 5 or 6 years ago. So I'm also kind of like, if we could kind of talk about this a little bit more, but I'm truly a hobbyist. I'm not a botanist. I'm not
Me too.
classically trained in anything. Like took all my biology and science classes in school, and it's always been something that I really loved and was easy for me, but I did not go to school for any
Yeah,
of this. Anything that I've learned has been from people who know what they're talking about. Um, I'd love to be able to say the internet, but the internet is
sure.
kind of a disaster when it comes to plant care or
Oh,
plant
I
knowledge.
definitely want to get into that. But let's rewind just a little bit,
Yeah,
and let's just find out who you are
yeah.
and where we are.
Yeah. Okay. So I am Kaylee Busick. I'm the director of design here at Rewild. I've been here since 2020. We are in the Capitol Hill shop right now, which is at Eastern
And
Market.
this was the first one?
The first one was in Shaw,
Oh, okay.
and
Oh.
then our second one was in Ballston Quarter.
Hmm.
And then this was our third shop,
Oh, I
was
was completely
supposed to
wrong.
be our third shop. And then we have another shop in Cabin John, Maryland. But the way it kind of worked out, this shop and Cabin John opened like at the exact same
I
time.
see. Cool.
So they're both third and fourth. Cabin John was, I think, only 1 month after Capitol Hill. So it feels like we've been here forever. This is, I hate to pick favorites, but I do think that this shop is one of my favorites.
It's a cool
Um,
location. I love this part of town, and Eastern Market right there is such a
yeah,
cool, for
it's a
the
cool
audience who's
vibe.
not from DC, Eastern Market is like, I think, kind of a rarity, except for like I don't know, most American cities don't have a market like that anymore, you know?
With the building, with
The,
all the
the original
stalls.
building, yeah.
It's very historic. This building is historic.
Uh-huh.
So that was a fun challenge during build out. In our landlords upstairs, they have their real estate office upstairs, and then we just occupy this space. But yeah, the building's historic. It's been restored. It was really fun. It was different than the other
Yeah.
shops, which are kind of just like more modern
Mhm.
and just you open. You paint the walls and you open.
Right.
Mhm.
Interesting. So interesting. So let's talk about, well, I think let's just first talk about why I'm doing this, because this episode is a little bit different for the audience. It's not how we normally do it, and it's because we're specifically coming here because we're talking about DC Plant Week.
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear about that. There was one, I think it was the first one a little over a year ago, maybe that's the second one, but like things have changed a little bit, but also like what is DC Plant Week?
Yeah.
What's Rewild's role in it? And
Sure.
let's talk about that.
So DC Plant Week is basically a week-long celebration of all the different plant stores and plant adjacent stores in, I'll say, the DMV. It is specifically labeled DC Plant Week, but at this point, over the past couple of years, it's really expanded. And it's kind of like anything that happens in DC, you
Yeah.
inevitably pull in Virginia and
Yeah.
Maryland, because it's just so small and right there.
Hmm.
So now it's expanded. We have a ton of collaborators. It's a great way to just kind of have something that's mutually beneficial for all of these shops, big and small. So we include stores like Ace Hardware's, and it's really nice too because in including all of these different stores in all of these different locations, we're also able to kind of make it really accessible for people. So I think we're more of a boutique, like upscale plant shop. We have things that are a little more rare or really large plants, some like designer pottery. But if you're somebody that is really just getting started and you want just like a little plant for your windowsill, you know, maybe Ace Hardware is going to be the best place for you. And then there's a lot of new and up and coming plant shops, some of which don't even have a brick and mortar yet. So being able to kind of, you know, we're this more established plant shop, we'll say 5 years in. I think we're doing okay with our 4 shops. The air is very loud.
Yeah. That's all right.
If we pick that up.
Yeah.
It's just a really mutually beneficial thing to be able, there's no downside in just kind of like promoting all the different types of shops, and all of us have a little bit of a different facet of what we bring to kind of this very I don't know, this is very early for me.
Yeah,
So
me too.
I'm like trying
it's a very specific kind of business. And actually, I think one thing that surprised me is how many plant shops there are in the area.
right.
And that, I think, is pretty fascinating because the demand is there, even though maybe it's not as obvious
Yeah.
to if you're just, when I didn't think about it. And yeah, so that's super interesting.
I think what I'm trying to say is it's always super fascinating how people end up connecting with plants. And I think that every business that we end up working with and collaborating with, whenever I'm talking to the owner or even the employees there, the thing that kind of brought them to plants and made them love plants and want to get into the industry is always very different from my own perspective. So some people, plants are really scientific, like they're really into the biology of it, agriculture, horticulture, like true horticulture. Those are people who are super into propagation and even food. Like they're interested in edibles and outside plants, for whatever zone you're in. And then some people are into more of like the floristry aspect. So like there's a different treatment of plants when you're kind of coming in from that angle, because they're kind of a little more utility, but it's also a lot more aesthetic. Some people are more into like wellness, so there's like a lot of like yoga or like maybe a lot of home goods involved there. So I think there's just so many ways that you can kind of get into the plant space. So truly, like it is incredible how many different plant shops there are, but they all have something different that they're bringing to the table.
Very cool.
Yeah,
And
it's cool.
I guess it seems like it's a little bit inspired by this like restaurant week movement. Is that the
Yeah,
case?
I would say.
Yeah.
I would say that that's especially in DC, where it's such a big restaurant town. Like that is a model that is being replicated here. We are the new stewards of DC Plant Week, so we recently took it over. So we now like manage the website and kind of the socials, and are kind of like pushing forth all the logistics and kind of getting everyone together, getting all of our ducks in a row. But really at its most high level, it's a celebration of plants. It's getting people excited about it. It's really promoting all of the different businesses in the area. And then on the micro level, each shop has its own kind of like promotions and event schedule. So it's a great way to just kind of like be out there, be loud and proud, get people excited about it, get new people into all the different shops with all these new perspectives, and just
Get some good deals on plants too.
definitely get some good deals. At the end of the day, lots of deals.
Yeah.
Lots of fun events, lots of free events, lots of promotions. So if nothing else, it's a great time to buy plants. But yeah, in the spirit of sharing and everything else.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I think I said this at the beginning of the show, but this is not a sponsored episode. I just think that plant shops are super cool, and that DC Plant Week is a cool idea. So buy plants, everybody. That's cool. But yeah, Rewild did not pay me to say that.
Nope. Yeah. And I'm always like about like the esoteric. I'm like, I just love when everyone gets to enjoy the plants, and I love hearing about everyone's stories with plants. So that's what's fun for me. Come to our events because I love talking to people about it.
Awesome. Let's go back to your plant story. Like how did you get into plants? And I don't know, maybe we always talk about on the podcast, on the normal episodes, about a plant that is meaningful to you, and sometimes people have like a spark plant. I've heard that called, like that got you into it. Is there something like that, or tell me your story?
Yeah. So I first got into plants. I remember I was like buying plants from Walmart in my college town in upstate New York, to bring into my dorm room, which had like one window. It was like a jail cell, so not a very conducive environment for growing a plant. And I think my first plant was actually like one of those little grafted cactus that had like a fake flower like glued to it. And then as the plant like slowly died because I was watering it way too much inside of a pot that had no hole, I was like, why is the flower alive and the rest of the plant dead? Because it's fake, because it is not real.
That's a journey of discovery, yeah.
That is a common experience I feel like lots of people can relate to, of having that aha moment of what is happening here. And so I kind of had a lot of that through college, and then early post-college, of just kind of like picking up random stuff from the grocery store and failing super hard, ruining lots of tables and surfaces. I had like a plant in a basket in my first apartment on a carpet floor that I just like, I don't know what the thought was, but I like ruined the carpet. But when I was in Boston, I actually got a part-time job, like on the weekends, working at a plant store called Niche. And that was owned by Lindsay Sweat at the time. I think they have since closed, at least the location that I was in, which was in South Boston. It was really, really fun, really cool boutique. And it just completely, I'd never seen a plant shop before, like where it was only plants, like cute little plants in pots. So I got a really huge kick out of just talking to people every single time I went in. I had never had a retail job where I was so like, it was very energizing instead of like draining customer service. So that was a real spark about like, hey, I think I really like this. Like this is more than just, I'd never had a hobby that had really sucked me in like that. So obviously I went home with a million plants and I really started to learn, I think, the eternal lesson of not every plant is for you. There's a little bit of a personality match there. I am not a fern person, even all this time later. Ferns are just not for me. We don't vibe. We don't match energies. We don't match cycles. But I kind of got into like layer 2 of like the hobby of really getting into like researching the plants and understanding where they were from, and having a deeper reverence like for the plant. Kind of respecting that like, yes, I'm bringing them into my space. Yes, it's a plant and I want it to look cool and be pretty, but like this is a living thing. So if I really want it to stay alive like long term, I kind of need to invest a little bit and understand where it's coming from. I ended up working there a little bit more and more and more until I was kind of like working there almost as much as my full-time job. And it was at that time that I became really obsessed with this kind of exploding plant space. This was in probably 2016, where like houseplants, especially on Instagram, was like really taking off. It was like all consuming. It sounds like a little crazy to talk about now, but you just had to be there.
I've heard a little bit about that. It's a little bit like, I mean, you don't want to like compare it to like one of those like classic fads because they're plants, right? They're not Beanie Babies,
right?
But I think there is. Just put this out there. I'm not much of a houseplant person. I'm more of an outdoor plant
Which
guy.
when I did some research on the podcast, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to talk about houseplants.
Yeah, but I do like it, and I do know there is this like collector's level of it. Like I'm looking at this. What is this one here? This is a pretty special plant, right?
Yeah,
with
this is a Dieffenbachia camouflage.
Variegations, right, and the like really kind of rare stuff. So I do get it for sure, and I could, in another world, because I'm a nerd. Just what nerd thing do I pick, right? And I just never went down that rabbit hole. But I totally understand that era, especially
it was like peak.
Yeah.
So I did what any normal, rational, reasonable person does, and I quit my job in Boston and I moved to New York City because I really just wanted to like be in this space. And I found a plant company called Tula, and Tula. Shout out Kristen and Ivan. They're incredible people. They're the founders of Tula. They had a plant truck at the time.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
it was a mobile plant shop, which
only in New York.
2016, Brooklyn, Instagram, plants in the truck.
Oh yeah.
You understand.
I see it.
I was swept away.
Yeah.
I was like, I need to know who these people are. I need to get inside their brain. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I basically just like showed up at their door and was like, please, 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 can I work here? And they were so gracious and they said, yes, absolutely. So I was their first non-founder hire, and I helped them with everything that they needed at that time. They were working out of a beautiful studio in Williamsburg, where we were being super curated with the plants. So huge reverence for like, not only the plant, but like the plant as specimen. So like, everything comes out of the greenhouse kind of very uniform. And it was kind of this practice of honoring that like that never is really how it stays, right? Like it's always going to adapt to your space, and as your space changes, or especially in New York, as you move spaces very often, that's going to take on a really unique characteristic and be unique to you. It becomes an individual. So, and especially when you're working with I think it was like a 15-foot box truck, there's just so many plants that you can
Right.
have on there. So instead of kind of packing it to the brim with things that all look the same, we kind of flipped it on its head and said, well, how do we take things that are super unique and one of a kind and kind of play that up? So they worked with local artisans to create like very unique pottery. It was just really cool.
Cool.
It was a really cool perspective. Now they have a really beautiful shop in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, which is like a mix, I would say, of kind of the old thought. They have a very well curated like design eye, and then just like, you know, you get a shipment of plants out from the greenhouse, and you sell them. But yeah, that kind of connected for me, that plants, you could have a deep reverence for like plant biology and understanding like where that plant is naturalized and then trying to mimic that environment, like the thinking about it that way. When I talk to customers like here in the store, I always see like the light bulb, especially with cacti and succulents.
Yeah.
People will be like, I'll be like, well, think about it. It's in the desert where there's no trees, there's no obstructions to the sun. You're getting 180 degrees of horizon. Like, it wants sun. It wants as much sun as you can get. And they're like, oh, right. Cactus live in the desert. Duh. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. I think we're just like...
We've talked about this on the show a few times, most recently with Fan Hong, who's an artist who, I don't know if you know her, she paints a lot of pictures of plants, particularly the snake plant, which was her favorite plant. But we have a tendency to like treat houseplants as furniture and not as individuals.
Yes.
And I think that's a really interesting
It's like a disconnect. You're like, you know it, but for some reason when you're looking at this plant in a plastic pot inside of a store, especially within the context of houseplant, it like loses all context in it.
In that episode with Fawn, we said it's like literal objectification, right?
Yeah.
It becomes an object in your home, right? It's very interesting. Yeah.
That you have to care for. I'm like, but you care for your pet, and you so it's kind of like just pushing people to redefine that relationship with this like piece of nature that they're bringing into their home, and finding that path to like understanding what is your relationship to the plant, what do you want your relationship to the plant to be, and then like we can match you up with what's going to kind of fit your conditions, fit the kind of relationship that you're open to, because you know, you could love how a calathea looks, but if you're like traveling every other week and you don't know anything about plants and you're kind of starting on your plant journey, you're going to have a bad time. It's not going to work.
Well, on the topic, maybe we can walk around the store a little bit, and let's just maybe point out a few interesting things, and let's see what we got here.
Yeah. Interesting things. So they will be bringing us some new plants in a little bit, but I don't know, things that are cool to me. Oh, I love these Aralias. So they're not actually Aralias. That's like a misnomer, which is
Very common, I think, in house plants. I mean, in all plants, but like, yeah, I have a rattlesnake plant, which I think for a long time was a Calathea, you said, but it's actually a Guppertia is the actual scientific name.
Yep.
But it's, anyway, yeah, it's interesting stuff how that happens.
That's why I try to not, like, as far as I'll go into, like, plant biology is trying to find, like, the actual name of the plant, the scientific, the Latin name of the plant, just because there's certain things like, like polka dot plant, where it's like that is literally multiple species have earned that name. So I never know what people are talking about. They need very wildly different care. But I love this guy.
Yeah.
This is actually a Fatsia. So it's in our zone. It actually is an indoor-outdoor plant. I think it dies back in the wintertime, but
That's interesting. Yeah.
I just love the leaf shape.
Yeah, it's
so
really cool.
fun.
It looks to me, it's got kind of this. I think, like I said, I'm not a biologist either, but I think that you would call this palmate leaf.
Palmate, yep.
And I think that's fairly rare in houseplants, actually, the
It
palmate
is.
shape.
Yeah.
They're normally more like spear-shaped or like,
Yeah, like oblong.
Yeah.
or even like the Dracaena where it's kind of like needly leaves or just round. But
Yeah.
finding this kind of serrated edge is like really unique. They're very thirsty.
Pretty cool.
What else? What else?
Really beautiful pots here.
Thank you. Yeah, these are from Material Things, which is a local ceramicist. They're in Brookland. We've worked with them for a really long time now. They created a bunch of different styles for us. This is called the macaron because it looks like a little macaroon.
Oh, yeah.
I don't speak French, so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure I said it two ways and both of them were wrong. But
This is a very fuzzy little cactus.
yeah, that's an old man cactus. It kind of looks like Bernie Sanders. So he is an old man.
Yeah,
So
that's
it tracks.
Yeah.
But it's also called an old man cactus. I don't know if I can say this on the podcast. Because when it grows little tiny, like round bulbous pups at the base. So you know
Sure.
what that looks
Yep.
like.
Okay. Yep.
A lot of the field has been dominated by men for a long time.
Sure.
So you can kind of, when you start digging, you're like, wow, okay, guys. Be a little more obvious.
I'm really interested in this tree here. What do we got here?
That is a cinnamon tree.
Legit cinnamon.
Uh-huh.
Wow. And you can have cinnamon as a houseplant?
You can. So we recently, we have a new supplier in California. Most of our plants were from Florida before that, and they are able to grow just like so many other different species of plants that, because of the climate, that haven't been accessible to us previously. So that's something we've gotten in the past couple months. It's really cool.
That is
the leaves are
fascinating.
really, really fun.
Does it smell like cinnamon?
You know, I haven't even
I think it's
noticed.
the bark of the cinnamon.
It
which
is because
yeah.
you'll peel it.
Yeah, right. Well,
Not really.
no, maybe.
I don't know that ours are mature enough.
Sure, that's yeah. I don't know much about cinnamon biology, but that's really cool. It stood out to me because it does look like a tropical tree.
Yeah,
You know?
the leaves are really pretty. Like they have kind of a classic shape where they're like spear, as you're saying, but they have like the three very distinct veins. So it kind of creates like a little boat shape.
Yeah.
But they're really, really pretty
That's really cool.
for the foliage, even
Yeah.
if you can't harvest
Uh-huh.
harvest from it necessarily.
Yeah, yeah.
Which that's the same with these. We've gotten a bunch of citrus, which we weren't able to get citrus for a long time because a couple years ago there was actually a really bad disease that basically wiped out all of the Florida crop.
Whoa.
Yeah, so these are from California, where I think it either wasn't affected as much or has been able to rebound.
That's cool.
But yeah, slowly getting back, but even on a commercial scale, like when there's a blight, there's a
Yeah,
blight.
that's and I guess it's always a challenge with commercial stuff because the tendency is to grow things close to each other, right? And then
Yeah, or just monoculture.
Yeah.
They're all like grafts from a different one singular plant, so their
The
genetics
yeah.
are very similar. We have a ton of specialty cacti that
Oh, yeah.
are. We had our Rewild West event in April, and then now we're getting mostly smaller specimens. We usually get really big specimens for that event.
got some really cool ones outside in the front, which I think is a nice touch to have, like the plants on the street, you know?
Yeah, we installed those planters last fall to just kind of have like a rotating display out there. So we do have this section out here onto the street, which I feel like is very unique also. So we have pop-ups out here, host different kind of vendors, but to have it kind of enclosed and surrounded by plants is really fun. Right now it's cacti, so it's not as lush, but it's still pretty cool.
That is cool. All right, let's pick one more plant that maybe even people who are like have some plant knowledge would be like, oh, that is pretty interesting.
What is brand new? People who have plant knowledge that think, oh my gosh, where is it? I just saw it. Okay, this guy is a Plectranthus. So I have always heard of this plant as called Cuban oregano, but again, we don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think it's even remotely closely
Yeah, it
related
doesn't.
to
The
oregano.
genus does not sound like it.
So this is like a tender-stemmed plant with fuzzy, kind of semi-succulent leaves, but it's one of the really cool like succulent-esque plant that develops this like cool woody stem. It's
yeah.
similar to if you have geraniums, like, and you overwinter geraniums and they start to develop those kind of like caudex.
Caudex, that's the
Yeah.
word I was looking for, yeah.
Yep, so
Oh,
that's
very
happening
interesting.
here.
Yeah, because it looks, I think a lot of those caudex plants don't look as like this looks like an herb.
Right.
And I guess, is it an herb? Is it?
So the thing I like about it, I think Plectranthus is edible, but if you break the leaf, it smells really good. This, you can break off a leaf.
Yeah.
There's plenty.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like lemony. Yeah. The kind that's variegated with yellow and white on it is extremely strong. It's like if I break a piece off of that in my house, I can smell it all through the house. But I love that guy. I'm a big geranium person. I'm not a big outdoor plant person because I just don't have like a wealth of knowledge. Anything I did know also was thrown out the window when I moved down here. I'm like from zone 4A and I'm like, what is this?
Very different. Very different.
Very different. But I do love geraniums. I love caudiciforms. I find them so fascinating, something I'm always trying to learn more about. They're so cool.
Yeah, there's the Dioscorea elephantipe we had someone talk about, and I'd never seen a plant like that before. I've never seen one in person, actually, but a guest was talking about it, and it's like, she compared it to like a Pokemon growing up, right?
Yeah. Like, what is it, Bulbasaur?
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
There we had some, just a few, and I think they're probably also, but we had them at Rewild West. But they're definitely more of a collector plant. I always speak about like levels, but it's much more fluid than that. But I would say like having a deciduous, semi-succulent caudiciform is definitely like, I don't even have one in my house. That is like a level of patience and being meticulous and care. Lily, our co-owner, has one, but she has, I think, a Stephania erecta. So I think it's some common name of it refers to it as like a potato plant of some sort, because I think the leaf shape is very similar to like what we would know as a potato plant, like the vegetable. But very cool. She had like a little tiny spike on it for months, and then it finally took off, and it's just it's like magic.
Yeah.
You're just
Wow.
Like,
So cool.
When are you ready? When are you coming?
Wonderful. Well, I think that we'll wrap up this episode. It was really awesome for inviting me here and to seeing the shop, and it's my first time in here, which is really cool. I think maybe the last thing I would just say is I'm not much of a houseplant guy.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, your skill of finding the levels. My houseplant blockers are, one, I don't have a ton of light. Two, I have cats. I have 3 cats, and they have eaten a lot of the houseplants. So right now, I only have this rattlesnake plant and a couple succulents like echeverias, and that's it. So what would you recommend if I want to like step up to a 3 houseplant household?
So first thing we always ask people is, what is your light like?
Yeah.
Like where you would put the plant, what is that light like?
Yeah.
Do you know what direction you face? Are there any obstructions?
The only direct light we get on the main floor is more west-ish.
Okay, that's good.
But it's only one window.
Okay.
Really. Well, there's another one in the kitchen too. So there's not a ton of direct light on the main floor. Upstairs, the main room up there is going to be the kids' room, so we don't want a lot of plants in there yet.
Right.
But so that's where we're looking for. It's like
Okay.
a living room, but it's mostly indirect light, and not a ton of it.
Okay. So I would probably say pet friendly. We have lots of pet friendly options. An easy one that would love that west facing window is really any of these plants, which are going to be Hoyas.
Oh boy.
So really like a lot of variety within the species. This is a Hoya rope, so that's got a cool leaf shape. Some have variegation. Anything trailing, I think, is like a really fun plant because they grow pretty quickly. So they're really satisfying to grow because you can kind of see it evolve over time.
Yeah, I've thought that maybe Hoya was where my life is taking me
Yeah.
here. So yeah, well, wonderful, Kaylee. Thank you so much for the recommendations and giving me the tour and telling
Of
me your
course.
your plant story. And everyone can check out DC Plant Week. There'll be links in the show notes. Also, Rewild links in the show notes. And yeah, thanks so much.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks.
This was awesome.
My guest on this special DC Plant Week episode of Rootbound was Kaylee Busek. Kaylee is the design director of Rewild, a plant shop in DC. You can learn more about Rewild at their website, which is rewilddc.com, and you can learn a lot more about DC Plant Week at the website for the event, dcplantweek.com. There are over 25 stores participating in this. It's a really cool idea. Is there a Plant Week in any other city? Shoot me an email if there is. I'd like to hear about Plant Weeks in other places. Rootboundpodcast@gmail.com. Rootbound is hosted by a guy with Hoyas in his future, Steve Ellington. Music by Christian Kriegesgota. Fake ads by David Lonnie. Rootbound is a podcast about plants for when you're stuck inside, but if you can go outside and you're in DC at the appropriate time of year, check out DC Plant Week.
Plants are really cool. They're the coolest.